Is it me, or does it seem like this week Donald Trump is laying the groundwork for contesting the election by complaining that cheating was taking place in Pennsylvania by suing Bucks County for alleged irregularities? And this is on top of his continual assertion that if he loses, it's because of cheating.
Yeah, that's what he's been laying the groundwork for this, just not in the last week, but in the last umpty-ump months. No election can be fair in Donald Trump's mind, unless Donald Trump wins it. And I think we are going to see him both rev up his supporters to contest elections outside of courtrooms and go to every courtroom he can in America where it's relevant to make whatever arguments he can, no matter how far-fetched. We saw that last time, but it didn't work out this time. That may not happen this time, and now I'll let you go, Hugh.
Well, I just got to say, we're news people, even though we're at the opinion section. It's got to be reported. Bucks County was reversed by the court and instructed to open up extra days because they violated the law and told people to go home. So that lawsuit was brought by the Republican National Committee, and it was successful. The Supreme Court ruled that Glenn Youngkin was successful. We are news people, even though we have opinions, and we have to report the whole story if we bring up part of the story. So yes, he's upset about Bucks County, but he was right, and he won in court. That's the story.
I'll let you keep going, Jonathan.
No, I don't appreciate being lectured about reporting when you many times you come here saying lots of things that aren't.
I won't come back, Jonathan. I'm done. This is the most unfair election I've ever been a part of. You guys are working. That's fine. I'm done.
So, Ruth, you wrote a column this week ending with this line, and actually, I think this is perfect. We're going to put it on the screen. You wrote, "You want to know the stakes of this election? Not only democracy, but decency." Talk more about that, Ruth.
Okay, I'm collecting myself.
Oh, Ruth froze.
And then she freezes.
Let's start with the partisan perspective. Look at that conservative snowflake. Rage quitting. Right. There's the objective analysis, however. The main guy brings up these lawsuits, and then he spends a majority of his time speaking about Trump making bogus claims, and, if he loses, trying to say he won, and all this kind of stuff. Just a little sprinkle of these lawsuits, but not going into details about them, but a ton of Trump election fraud nonsense, blah. Now, if I'm not a big critical thinker and I'm not really good in terms of media analysis, I'm going to read from this that Donald Trump yet again did a bunch of bogus lawsuits, because that's what he does, right? That's what he does. And they mention the lawsuits, and then they proceed to talk about him doing his bogus nonsense. So I would presume that those lawsuits were nonsense. However, Hugh Hewitt brings up that, no, the lawsuits were legitimate and they actually won. And okay, that would have been a surprise to me as an objective listener. But okay, so he actually did have some legitimate lawsuits. But this guy is a right-winger, so maybe he's being dishonest about it, right? So let's hear some pushback. No pushback whatsoever. The main guy just completely ignores that and instead chooses to give an ad hominem attack about, I don't want to be lectured because dude, who cares about him lecturing you or whatever, whatever you feel about what he's saying, right? What about the substance, right? He made a claim about that the cases were valid and he won the cases. Either that's true or it's not true. As a journalist, that should be your perspective, right? You should be saying, Hugh Hewitt, no, that's actually not what happened. He actually didn't win the cases. Or, yes, we acknowledge that he won the cases, but he's using that as a way to trick people or something, right? But instead of that, hand wave it away and, talk about you, blah. Now, Hugh Hewitt's response was a bit snowflakey. Stand your ground, as he did, right? They mentioned this. They didn't go into details about it. So you jump in and you give the details about it. But then when he gives this weak pushback attacking your character, defend yourself, stand your ground, respond and say, hey man, what does what I said in the past have to do with what we're talking about right now? Is there anything that I said that's wrong, right? That's the strength, having a spine. That's the masculine thing to do, right? But instead of that, he just runs away and crying like a baby. Oh, I'm not going to come back. So I see failures on both ends, right? The original guy looks like he didn't get the full context of the story. He probably misled a lot of people, because I know that without Hugh Hewitt saying that would be my assumption, because I know Trump does bogus lawsuits. So I would assume this was a bogus lawsuit, especially after the guy brings it up and then talks about the bogus stuff that Trump does. That's my assumption, right? So as a journalist, if someone like me, who is a little bit deeper thinker than average, if that would be my perception without Hugh Hewitt stepping in, then you're not doing your job right? And then for him to come and add the details, and then again, you don't have any rebuttal. You just, every time you come here, what? However, this is a left-wing channel that was presenting this. This is a Humanist Report or Rational National. So is he going to point out these details, or is he going to let it slide and just make it a dunked on conservatives video?
Has to be. But what's funny about this, what I find so funny about this, is that there is actually some merit to what Hugh Hewitt was saying. So while Trump, okay, let me be clear here. The lawsuit was successful, And it was because there were polling locations that were being closed for mail-in ballots before 5 p.m. So I don't think I highlighted anything here, but if you get, so they were voters who were told by the county officials as early as 2:40 p.m. on Tuesday that they would not be able to apply for the ballot. So basically, they should have been open until 5 p.m. and they weren't. Now, even though this was, I think, a solid reason to sue to ensure that people who wanted to vote were able to vote, I do think the intention here is not honest. I think the intention here is to lay the groundwork for future lawsuits to say, hey, look, we sued before and we were successful because this was an obvious one, an obvious get that, honestly, even the Democratic Party could have sued here.
So I'm going to take this further than anyone in this conversation has taken this in terms of journalism, right? So it's nice that Rational National pointed out the perspective of, listen, these lawsuits were valid. They won the lawsuits. He informs the audience about, hey, they closed the polling locations early, right? And the courts forced them to open up a couple more days because of it. So that was good. You're getting much more of the picture. However, there's still some pretty big gaps that if we had good news media, if we had good journalism, someone in this whole perspective, like how many people talk about this? Hugh Hewitt, the guy from Washington Post, and now we got Rational National. Out of all of these people, none of them has dived deep enough to actually cover the full story. There's still some big holes. So for example, why were the polling locations closed early, right? What was the reasoning given for closing locations early? Who authorized the locations to be closed early, right? They went to court and they won in court, so they must have had to defend what they did and why they did it, right? Good journalism, one of the rules that you're supposed to follow is who, what, why, when, where, right? So you haven't really told the story until you have touched on all of those elements. However, if you're putting out propaganda, so your goal is not to inform the audience, and you're not worried about who, what, when, where. You're worried about what elements push the rhetoric or push the certain emotions that I want to promote in my audience, which will be most profitable to me, right? Whether it's dunking on conservatives or dunking on liberals, right? So out of all these people, in this case, I have to say Rational National did the best job, but even him fell short of delivering the full perspective. Now, I will give him some credit. His story was not about the actual story, about that, what the polling locations closing or whatever. I guess he's more commenting about this live interview that this guy quit from. But still, regardless of the reasoning behind it, none of the audiences of any of these shows comes away fully informed about what actually happened. Everyone's going to have just bits and pieces and their own perspectives, and they're going to fill in a lot of gaps themselves, depending on their biases. And that's just not the way journalism should work. So he did the right thing. And this is yet another example of how partisan left-wing media, because that's what this guy is a propagandist, is far better in terms of integrity and quality than what we have in right-wing media. Like, American media is very toxic, it's very bad, it's very divisive, but right-wing independent media represents the very worst of our media, the most dishonest of our media. And this shows yet again another example. Here is this partisan left-winger who he does not need to acknowledge any points that Hugh Hewitt made, and that is not what you would see on right-wing media. You think that Ben Shapiro would be acknowledging that some, Bernie Sanders actually has a point, or Joe Biden has a point, or Kamala Harris has a point. He ain't doing that, right? He's going to focus on dunking on how this left-winger rage quit, and, he's so soft and in his feelings, and he unable to defend his points, or whatever it is, right? That's what he's going to focus on and make the video about. But this guy, he shows what happened. He laughs at the conservative for quitting, as he should. I mean, it was kind of hilarious. But then he quickly says, but wait a minute, the things he brought up were actually valid. So this is how you can be more informed about the truth and reality of what's happening in this country, by watching left-wing media than right-wing media, right? Watching this video on this channel, I learn about these lawsuits that Trump did, and that they actually were valid lawsuits. And I also learned about the perspective that, he is probably using this as a way to mislead people. You see that? Now, this guy, as a left-winger, he could have chosen to focus just on that, which is kind of what the Washington Post people were doing, right? They just wanted to focus on Trump is being sneaky, blah, blah, which is a valid part of the story that should be reported. But they didn't want to give the full context, right? And this actually allows right-wing media an opening to manipulate people, right? Because they can point to, look at the stuff that the left-wing media doesn't want to tell you, right? They are going there saying Trump is in a bunch of bogus lawsuits, but did you know that Trump actually won cases and the cases were actually valid? And then the average person watching liberal media will be surprised, like, oh, I didn't know that. And then some of them will be like, that's interesting. And then they start listening to some of these, liars like Ben Shapiro. And next thing you know, they all of a sudden turn their back to liberal media. And now they start trusting Ben Shapiro. So now Ben Shapiro is manipulating them the same way liberal media was, right? But they don't see it anymore because now their attention's focused on, liberal media bad, right? They go from partisan, dishonest media to even more partisan, dishonest media, because we just have this binary mentality. It's either I'm on the left and all I focus on is the right is bad, or I'm on the right and all I focus on is the left is bad, right? And if you think that way, then that's how you could be a person watching and trusting liberal media and allow a dishonest right-winger to point out some lies that you've been told, and then to get you to their side. And once they get you to their side, because you're one way, now you've just changed your gaze to now I'm only going to focus on the left and liberal media, right? Every day, liberal media sucks. So now Ben Shapiro gets to lie to me even more than liberal media was. And it's just insane. It's insane. And then people want to know, why are people leaving the left and going to the right? Because of, horrible journalism like we just saw from the Washington Post. I'm not a fan of these partisan, I don't like partisan media, where it's left wing or right wing. So I'm not a fan of Humanist Report or Rational National. But I'm a fan of reality. I'm a fan of truth. And the truth is, he did a really good job here by highlighting a good percentage of reality. He could have chosen to focus on the reality of Trump, dishonesty, and mocking the conservative, but he went beyond that and said, hey guys, by the way, the stuff Hugh Hewitt said was actually true, making his audience more informed. If I watched Ben Shapiro, I'd be less informed, because Ben Shapiro would just talk about the left did this and the left did that, and Bernie Sanders is a Marxist blah, right? Again, example of why left-wing partisan media is better than right-wing partisan media, even though I hate all partisan media.